be a little disturbing and something to be scary about, but there's something about people of faith, as we are, that we believe God has a plan for us, and that if we fulfill His expectations of us, the plan will be good, and we shouldn't have to worry about what the future may bring for us. That same statement applies to finances. You may know and recall that for many years we have come to the annual meeting asking the congregation to approve what we call a faith budget. And a faith budget simply is one in which the numbers say, this probably won't work. Expenses exceed revenue. But we approve that budget every year with the faith that we'll make it work. And in most years we do. The reason we're here today is that the budget you're going to see at the annual meeting this year is particularly challenging. It's still a faith budget, and we're going to talk about how important faith is going to be for us to approve and move forward with this budget. But you need to understand it first, and we thought it would be a good idea to have this meeting to discuss it and get your understanding of it, so that we don't have to talk about this at the annual meeting. We can go right to the budget with everybody feeling that they understand what it says, whether they approve it or not. So there's a reason for the challenges. There's something going on right now unique to these times at St. Stephen's that is creating this challenge. Rising prices. We all know what that means. We do have expenses in our budget that are greater than our revenue, a little bit more this year than they have been in past years. But I want to emphasize this third bullet up there, because this is something that has been kind of unique to the last 18 months or so, is that we've lost members for various reasons that have taken with them giving that is about 10% of our budget. So keep that in mind as we go forward. But I want to close with one thing about how we have risen to this challenge, is that those of us who are still here are giving very generously. And that's reflected in a giving level per unit family that's higher than it's ever been before. So I want to end with that before Mary Beth gets up here and gives you more information on the story.
I'll try not to be too boring here. I'm going to start. Oh, yeah. I'm going to start at 2021 because 2021 we ended the year flush, and with money in the bank of $220,000. So we were good there. In 2022, we took a downturn in our cash. Our cash flow is, what we have in our checking account and our savings and money markets and stuff like that. It's important because that's what runs the church, and that's what we pay the bills and stuff off from. In 2022, you see that we had a significant drop in cash. Part of that was because we did purchase the bank of furnaces, so we had taken money out of capital. But unfortunately, we ended that year over $14,000 in the hole. So when we were 14,000 in the hole, we had a team get together called the Evergreen Team, trying to figure out ways that we could either boost revenue or do expenses. A couple things that we did: we improved the stewardship and financial appeals. We hired a realtor to look for tenants to rent out space. We have not found anybody yet to be able to do that, but we are still looking. And then we've had better outreach to raise awareness of St. Stephen's, the event that we had with Pat Miles, trying to get people to recognize us and maybe join us. So in 2023, this downturn, because we did actually lose quite a few families in 2023 between death and Jim leaving. So our downturn in cash started to escalate. And so you see that we're down, you know, a little bit here. I'm sorry, I read better off a script. So, things I don't want to say about that. I was expecting this to be worse. When we were going into that last appeal, I thought we were going to end up somewhere between $70,000 and $80,000 negative. But the outpouring that you guys did was fantastic. And we ended at negative 50, which I feel is manageable. This is the division of the cash balances. Benevolence was even. The cash reserve has, and this is why I'm not worried so much about the 50,000 in the hole, is because our cash reserve at 50,000 is sort of keeping up with what we're negative. Capital has $100,000 in it, and then special designated is running 59,000. But current is still 50,000 behind. Like I said, I'm not worried about that right now because of the cash reserve. We're doing good. So anyway, going forward in our budget, with the intent cards that came in, and estimating that I do of people who do not turn in an intent card, other income that comes in between interest from the banks, Wednesday night meals, things like that, flowers. We have a total income, expected income of $346,000. So we laid out our budget expenses, and these are what we have. Our salaries are 272, which we can't really do too much about. You know, we aren't going to be able to lower that without any. I'm not going to go there. Sorry. Administration costs sit about 40,000. Operations and maintenance 47. Ministry budgets is 27, and benevolence is 18. So we're looking at a budget this year of $405,785. If we were to pass this budget, we're looking at almost $60,000 negative added on to the 50,000 that we have. That's not sustainable. Yeah. So this is what our cash would look like at the end of the year. This next one is sort of a better representation of what it's going to look like. So in 2021, we're flush, starts to rise in 2022, rises a little bit more in 2023. But if we go forward this way and we're going to end up with $100,000 debt, and we're actually going to be below our cash value that we have in the bank. So what we would like to get to this year, not forgetting about the 50,000 negative that we have right now, but in 2024, we want to try to just stay even to where we are, and we will, throughout the year, figure out how we can peg away at that 50,000. But this budget, which Ted's going to talk about a little bit, we need to get back down. We need to end our 2024 this way.
Whoops. make sure I'm starting in the right place here. The figure that really disturbed the finance team was a cash level projected for next year that is less than $100,000. That figure, we've never been that low before. And when you think of our year looks like this, and this is the end of the year, it creates the threat that sometime in the middle of the year, the cash level might even be lower. So we felt that some revision to this budget was critical to try to keep the cash level up. And as Mary Beth showed you on that last goal graph we showed you, the goal is we've got $150,000 in cash right now. We want to have $150,000 at the end of this year. That's our goal. You still have this $50,000 current fund deficit, but we're on the mend if we can do that. $150,000 of cash gives us a real good comfort level. So how do we do this? We eliminate that deficit that was shown in the budget that Mary Beth showed you, of almost $60,000. How do you do this? You cut expenses, you gain additional revenue, or a combination of the two. So we're using the figure $60,000 as our goal, a budget adjustment of $60,000. The issue that creates this meeting and creates this greatest concern is we're not going to be able to figure that out overnight or in a week or in a meeting or two. That's going to take time. Yet we're meeting in 3 weeks at an annual meeting where it's absolutely imperative that we walk out of there with a budget approved for 2024. So how do we make this decision that can't be made in such a short time frame? And what I bolded there is the answer we came up with. We call it a step-down budget. And what it is, we approve the budget that you saw earlier in terms of expected expenses, expected revenue, but we put a line in there saying unspecified budget adjustment of $60,000 and give ourselves time to figure out what that looks like. Oops, geez, I did. So if we do that, that brings us back to the chart you saw earlier that had a significant problem with the balance of this year's budget. We balance it. $60,000 brings us back to almost zero for the budget that we want to approve at the annual meeting. Now, I show this in this column as if we're taking it all out of expenses. Cut expenses by $60,000, and the problem goes away. The problem with that is that's going to be tough. That hurts to go right to expenses and say that's how we're going to solve the problem. A better approach. Let's split it in half and make our plan $30,000 in additional income and $30,000 in expense cuts such that we get that adjustment. So the budget you would see at the annual meeting would look like this. Adjustments in two different columns. What this does is it brings us back to that goal that I mentioned earlier, that we would end 2024 with $150,000 or more in cash. So here's the recommendation. Step-down budget with $30,000 in expense cuts. But here's the second part is we, as a congregation, make a commitment to provide $30,000 in additional giving early in the year, not in the end of the year. We've done this before. This is the faith part. Every year you've seen our budgets, they have this additional income figure, which is huge. And it comes in at the end of the year. It doesn't come, all of it doesn't come in. But raising $30,000 from us through additional giving is doable. We've done it before. What we need, though, is to do it early in the year rather than late, so we don't keep ourselves in this suspenseful, scary scenario for 10 or 11 months when we maybe can get there in the next couple of months. Then the church council would be given the task of figuring out what the plan is for expense cuts. Develop it and implement it. This will be discussed at the council meeting tomorrow night. But we need to do this soon. So the goal we would set for the council is, in 4 months, let's figure out how we're going to do this. And then what's most important is this whole plan comes along with regular and frequent reporting about the progress. So we're all talking about it, and we know what we're doing and how well we're doing. Closing thoughts. 10% increase in giving is within our reach. We've done it before. 10% of each of us, you can do your own math of what that would amount to. But if we all the giving families in St. Stephen's were to increase by 10%, we've met the $30,000 goal. We've been there before. Some of you may have been here in 1989. We called it the attempted coup. And the result of that was a lot of members left the church and took their giving with them. And those of us who were still here rallied around the church mission. We made the budget work. There was increased volunteerism, but it was a challenge we met. You also may remember in 2007 what Freed for Mission was. We needed to raise almost $200,000 to retire our debt, and we did that. And then one of the things that I've always been very fond of this congregation is whenever there is a special appeal, everybody steps forward. Stained glass windows, piano, all these things were paid for through special appeals in which the congregation stepped forward. So 2 things I want to say right now in closing. One, in a moment I want to take comments and questions and try to answer them for you. But I want to tell you that we also left on the welcome desk a stack of, I'll call them survey sheets. You'll recognize them when you see them out there. And if there's any ideas you have, any thoughts about what you've heard today, what you think is a good approach to take, we'd like to hear from you. And if you don't want to bring it up today in this group, please write it down and slip it in the mail slot. Take it home with you, and if you want to think about it some more. Second thing is I'd like to ask Pastor Carrie Anderson to come up here to speak about her experience with other churches as it relates to what we've been talking about today.
Thank you, Ted. I have been at this is my 11th interim, and I had one settled call for 9 years. And this is the first congregation that I have been a part of who does not have a mortgage. When I found that out, it just blew me away. I want to, first of all, I should say thank you too to the leadership. Too often, I think, congregations try to fix this and keep it from the congregation because they don't want people to get nervous or upset about the debt that they are looking at on paper. And what ends up happening is that then there's not transparency. And the other thing that happens is that it goes to a point where then there's not anything that anybody can do, and they have to bring it to the congregation. And I want to thank the leadership for bringing it now so that we can work on this together. This may seem overwhelming. It is not a big thing. $30,000 to raise in extra giving is not a big ask, I don't think. And also working at lowering our expenses, I think is something that we can work on and is going to give us all of the balance that we need to reach the goal that we have. I think it's easily reachable. I think this congregation, I've been here just this is my first week here, and I've just been so impressed with the financial aspect of the congregation, what you have to offer, and how you step forward when things are needed. And so I would just like you to take this as, it's a challenge, but it's not scary. That's the thing I would like to leave you with, is that you had said that too, that it's doable, we can do this if we come together as a team. And the other thing that I would also like to encourage you to do is to, when you are out, part of what we are as Christians is to proclaim the Word of God to those that we come in contact with. And so if you have a friend, or if you have a neighbor, or if you have relatives that you want to just invite to come to St. Stephen to see who we are and what we're about. That's what we should be doing as well. And I think through that effort as well that we will be seeing some new families. One of the things that is the most common thing that happens when a church goes into an interim time and a pastor leaves, especially a pastor that's been here for a long time, is people leave the congregation. Or a lot of times people will say, I'm not going to give until I know what's going to happen. Those are very, very normal things that happen and not anything that you need to be concerned about. So let's go out there and let the world know who we are and what we have to offer. And once again, thank you for bringing this to the congregation.
Let me add one more remark before I open this up to questions. You notice that in our presentation, either Mary Beth or myself talked about the call process. They're separate. We believe this is unaffected, will unaffect the call process. The two are very independent. So we don't feel that it is going to impact the success of the call process. One thing, though, the way they are linked is I think we all have the optimistic expectation that we're going to hire a pastor who revitalizes things here. And part of that is the hope and expectation that that pastor helps us grow the membership base, which would be part of the solutions of long term. Are there any questions?
Yep, on that first line, the administrative costs are things like your paper, postage, copier, we rent the copier, the computer equipment that we have to buy or software that we need to support. We have fees that we have to pay. So that's the first part of the administrative, and then the second part of the operating stuff is the furnace, the heat and water, the garbage pickup, and just general maintenance of having to clean the place. So, does that answer? Any other questions?
I don't understand why we're saying it's $60,000 that we need to cover next year. What about the $50,000 that we're going to be entering this coming year with that we've already got in the negative? Is this a total of $110,000?
Yes. If we were to come up flush, if we were to come up flush today, we'd need an extra $50,000. And what we're anticipating over the year with the budget is that if we don't do something to take care of those by lowering expenses and having more income come in, we could be 110 in the hole.
So at the end of 2024, with the budget that you're talking about, will still be $50,000.
Yes.
So that's 653 that you've got there.
Yeah, and I would call those baby steps. I honestly think it's too big of an ask to have the congregation come up with $110,000.
I just wanted to make sure I understood what the total was.
Yep. Any other questions? Well, he wants to know how 2025 is going to look different than 2024. I'm hoping that with some of the expense cuts that we have, that you sort of get into a groove. Once we figure it out, we just don't have the answer today. But we've got a year to do it, and if we can end where we are today, then we can move into 2025 with, we'll still have the 50,000, but we've already made cuts to the budget, so the budget for the next year would be, I would say, less.
Can you repeat that?
He wants to know if those cuts would be permanent. You want to?
Maybe, but to answer your question, we don't know what 2025 is going to look like. We just want to make sure we get there. And so we can deal with it then, so.
And some of the cuts, I mean, you naturally think about is we can bring our postage down. One of the things is I'm going to have Brad only give a year-end statement. Right now, we spend like $50 or $60 for postage just to mail out a quarterly statement. I think most people know where they are. So, you know, I mean, it's going to be things like that. Paper usage, you might get more stuff over email versus getting a letter in the mail that gives the information. Those are just small cuts, but we'll have to try to figure out. Jill is going to go through all of our contracts, and you know, we pay $7,000 to have our garbage taken away, and I don't think anybody has really gone through and see if there's another provider out there that can be cheaper than that. You know, it's going to be those things that we're going to work on over the next few months to try to see if we can lower our insurance rates, but we need time to look into those things to see if we can lower some costs someplace. Anything else? Yep.
I just want to thank you on behalf of everybody here, because this is not easy, and we know it takes a lot of time and effort and thought. So we appreciate everything that you're doing on our behalf.
Thanks for coming. We'll be talking more about this in coming weeks. One of the things we want to do is put something about this context of this conversation in the bulletin this week for people who weren't here this Sunday. But I hope all of you just show up at the annual meeting, think about this, and we'll continue the discussion and hopefully approve the budget, a budget at the meeting. But thanks for coming.